We're live in 3 minutes. Places, people, places! The producer screamed, taking his place off set. The cameras moved into position as I skimmed over today's top stories. Nothing new. Terrorists, murderers, fires, and rape seemed to plague the news on a daily basis. I glanced over at the other news anchor, Jacqueline, who was looking particularly beautiful today. Her blonde hair was tightly packed into a bun, and her pale skin was glowing underneath the studio lights. Jacqueline's blue eyes always seemed to have a sparkle to them, but today in particular, they were like crystals. I tried to spark a small conversation, but it was quickly shut down as we were live in 2 minutes. Jacqueline always put work first. Glancing over towards the weatherman, Josh, he appeared rather anxious today. He usually had a calm look on his face, but today he appeared as though he was in a rush. He nervously tapped his shoes on the ground. His eyes were darting around the room. It was as if it was his first day on the job, despite him working at the station for over 4 years. 1 minute until showtime. Clearing my throat and straightening my posture, I made eye contact with the camera positioned right in front of me. On the table was a tablet positioned towards me, which showed the show in real time. We were only supposed to watch this when we were transitioned to another reporter away from the studio, or to take a glance at it so we could see how we looked. We also were supposed to use it for research and stuff, but seldom was it ever used for that purpose. 30 seconds until showtime. I took a big swig from the glass of water resting before me, cleared my throat once again. I rested my hands on the desk below me and crossed my fingers together. Taking one last glance at the top stories, I heard the producer calling out, "We're live in 4, 3, 2. He pointed at us, and the typical introduction music began to play. Now he's starting the show today. Good evening, I'm Andrew Smalls. Thank you for joining us. We go straight to our top story today, starting out with yet another murder in Hawthorne. Joining us live down at Hawthorne for more on the story is Vincent Stockton. What do you have for us today, Vince? We transitioned over to Vincent as I read ahead. After a few stories, we were to transfer over to weather and then have a commercial break. So far, so good. I listened to his story through an earpiece, and after 3 minutes or so, he turned it back to me. Thanks, Vincent. Now I'll turn it over to the lovely Jacqueline for some more on the recent lottery scandal. Jacqueline? I smirked at myself for such a stupid compliment, and quietly listened to Jacqueline's beautiful voice reading off the latest stories. Afterwards, she turned it over to Josh, who did a brief report on the weather. And then we went to a commercial break. Josh approached me and whispered in my ear, "How many times do I have to tell you, back away from my girl? We're happily married as it is, and we don't need you intervening." He sneered and slowly backed away. So, yes, they were married, but so what? I don't think Josh can say that he had every interview with Jacqueline ever done recorded and saved, nor does he have hundreds of photos of her at work cut out and pasted into a scrapbook. It really grinded my gears how Josh was so protective of his wife. I could tell that he didn't love her as much as me. Nearly every night, I would go home and cry myself to sleep with the scrapbook on my lap, sometimes kissing the pictures and other times doing things I'd rather not say to them. I knew she loved it when I would caress her cutouts. Thinking about the scrapbook only made me more enraged. We were to come back on air any minute now, so I couldn't strike up another conversation. What was I to do? If I didn't speak to her soon, I would lose her. I couldn't afford to lose her love for me. Quickly thinking, I turned towards her and I said, "Good job on the stories today. I couldn't have done it better myself." I couldn't tell if the look in her eyes was confusion or compassion, but I would prefer to go with the latter. She had a funny look and grin on her face and muttered the quiet, "Thanks," but quickly turned away and avoided eye contact with me. I loved when she did that. We were finally back on air, and I began to read off more stories. After 2 or 3, I turned it over to Josh, who reported more on the weather as an upcoming storm was approaching. Everything was running smoothly until he turned towards us and said, "All right, sweetie, take it away." He had a slick grin on his face. I turned towards Jacqueline, who giggled like a schoolgirl and responded, "Thanks, honey. It's currently 5:32 p.m. and..." At that point, I stopped listening. I felt sick to my stomach. How could Josh say something like that? And how could Jacqueline take such a stupid compliment? I turned a deathly pale as I began to sweat profusely. My hatred for Josh and my love for Jacqueline rapidly grew as I reached into my pocket. I never thought I would have a need for this, but I knew the day would come where I would have to protect my woman from such a dirty beast. I couldn't afford to lose her. In the middle of her story, I abruptly blurted out, "Jacqueline, I would just like to say something to you. You are the most beautiful woman I have ever met, and I want to spend every waking moment of my life thinking about you. I don't know why our love for each other is faltering, and you're not staying true to yourself. I see it in your eyes. You think you love Josh, but in your heart, you know you love me. You know it, damn it. You know damn well that you want to stay with me for the rest of your life. We can run away and start a new life. I can introduce you to my parents and... I looked down at myself, realizing the monster I had become. My mouth frothed. My eyes were wide and bloodshot. My once tan skin was now a ghostly white. I glanced over to Jacqueline, who had a look of horror in her eyes. Without hesitation, I revealed the gun I had stored in my pocket every day, just in case something were to happen to Jacqueline. The first 3 shots hit Josh straight in the chest, and he quickly hit the floor. Jacqueline screamed and ran over to him, sobbing. I shot a glare in the direction of the crewmen, who had either fled or were attempting to get off the air. I fired random shots at the crew, who soon fled the studio. Security would be here any minute. I pointed the gun at Jacqueline, who was still focused on her dying husband. "Jacqueline, why do you make me love you so much? The way you came to work every day, you teased me. You made me do this. You drove me to do this, and if I can't have you, then no one can." In a blind fury, I shot at Jacqueline, blowing a hole in the back of her skull. She and Josh lay next to each other in a large pool of blood. Realizing what I did, I silently collapsed into a chair positioned in front of the camera. Talking straight to the camera, I uttered, "Please excuse us. We're having some minor technical difficulties." I brought the gun up to my head as I saw security storming into the building. And at that, I pulled the trigger right in front of the camera. I would finally be with my Jacqueline.